Hi, my name is Wenli Lim, and I'm the Chief Impact Officer at FlourishDX and host of this podcast. The purpose of this podcast is for conversations, practical guidance from subject matter experts, service providers, innovative tech platforms, and employers in the region. So we believe in taking a shared responsibility approach to workplace mental health. So just not as individuals, but as colleagues, employers, and the broader community to help create mentally healthy workplaces so we can prevent suffering and promote human flourishing. So today I've got one of my colleagues over in Perth, Australia, joining us as the guest. Welcome, Joelle.
Hi, Wen. Thank you for having me again.
No, thank you for coming back. I actually thought about this the other day that we had you on before, and I was just thinking, you know what, we need to get Joelle back because you're like the guru, especially about what we're going to talk about today, which is the international standard on psychological health and safety. So very, very glad to have you back. How have you been?
Yeah, good. I had a nice Christmas break, and then I've recently had a birthday, a 40th birthday. So I had a nice long weekend away at a sort of a beach town in the southwest with my family, and just some good food and a couple of good books, and just relaxing and unwinding, which was really lovely.
Oh, that sounds magical. I think for those who haven't traveled, like just the thought of southwest, like going somewhere remote and having just being able to chill. Okay, we're all holding out for the time we can travel, but yeah, and happy birthday. I'm so glad that you have no qualms about talking about your age.
No, absolutely not. You know what? I think that it's my mother passed at 62, and so that for me just made me think, well, why on earth would we be embarrassed about getting older? It's a gift, to be able to have life. So no, embrace it, man.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've had friends who've passed younger, and I'm like, we're just so thankful we get to live another day. It is a gift, and we should celebrate growing old. I just feel like everyone's so ashamed of it, and I'm like, no, it's such an incredible thing to experience more of life, and to be around for another day. So I'm hoping this will help change listeners' views on aging as well. Even though
that's it,
yeah.
just me. When the fact that I've come out as being 40, that's going to change the world.
Little by little, it makes a difference. I'm okay. You
well,
can tell.
I
Go on.
hope so.
I'm an internal optimist, so you can tell I'm just like, oh, you know what? It does make a difference. But actually, the stuff that you're going to be talking about today on the podcast is going to make a difference. I've been talking to quite a lot of people in Singapore and in Asia, and there's still very little awareness on the international standard on psychological health and safety. And I did tell them, it only came out mid-year last year, so there's not a lot of talk about it. But I was like, you know what? Why don't we have an episode on it and just unpack it. So thank you so much for just sharing your knowledge. I'll be sitting here asking lots of questions, which I think will be questions that other people will have. So this will be a 101. So let's start basic. But actually, before we go into that, what brought you here in terms of your career, and so that people get to know you a little bit more about your experience and what you've done to date?
Yeah, sure. So professionally, I'm an organizational psychologist. So that means that I've done an undergraduate in psychology, and then a master's in organizational psychology, and then a registrar program of supervised practice to then be endorsed as an organizational psychologist in Australia. My work experience has been basically in sort of safety psychology for my whole career. So working in using principles of organizational and group psychology to improve safety outcomes for employees and for organizations, and primarily in sort of high hazard, sort of major accident type organizations, so petroleum and mining overwhelmingly. I joined People Diagnostic just over 12 months ago now. And before that, I was actually with the regulator for the offshore petroleum industry in Australia, NOPSEMA, and I was with them for 9 years as a human factors specialist, and then sort of started to incorporate psychological health and safety into my role in the last few years there, as it started to gain more traction in the industry.
Yeah, so you're definitely the guru, or definitely in this room right now, but definitely you've had a lot of experience in it. So the ISO, what is it? How did this come about? Can you just give us a very high level before we get into some of the nitty gritties around it?
Yep, sure. So it's ISO 45003. So that means that it's a child standard of 45001, which is around safety management systems. So this standard is really designed to be used in conjunction with 45001. So it's essentially about, if you've already got a safety management system that is aligned with or certified to 45001, then this standard really takes you through the process of how to embed psychological health and safety into your existing safety management system. So it's not about developing an entirely new system, but it's about, I guess, upgrading what you've already got so that you're also covering psychological health and safety as well as physical health and safety.
And what do you think were the factors that pushed ISO to come up with a standard like this?
Um,
Or just your
I would
views, like,
imagine,
yeah.
yeah, like, look, I think that it's been a long time coming, and there's the Canadian standard has been around for a very long time, and there's been like the UK management standard as well. I think that just growing recognition around the world that mental health is something that organisations do have a role in. And also recognition that the way that organisations have been approaching mental health um, doesn't really align with principles of occupational health and safety approaches. So I think that it's really about, the standard is there to help organizations understand how mental health is actually their responsibility and how to do it properly from, taking a prevention approach rather than a, getting people into treatment type of an approach.
In simple ways, I've been explaining it that, organizations are required to keep a physically safe workplace for their people. And now it's going to be that, psychologically safe workplace is now required as well. So it's expanding that. Yeah, so that's kind of like in very layman's terms how I've been kind of explaining it to people who are not aware of this. So this came out, I think it was 8th of June last year. Is that right?
Yes, I
Around
don't.
there. Yeah, around in, I
Around
think it was
then,
like
yeah.
mid-year last year. And so,
Yeah.
and I believe it was in draft a couple of years before that. So what has it been like talking to your clients and, around this area of the ISO? Has the reception been good? Or are people just like, yeah, finally there's a standard that is international that we can all follow? What's the reception been like?
I would say that there's been a spectrum. So some people are just indifferent to it completely, and other people are really pleased and they're keen to sort of get on top of it and be early adopters of the standard. And they've got different motivations for wanting to do so. And for lots of organisations, something like being certified to 45,001 isn't a business priority for them. So 45,003 also, is not something that they're overly concerned with because they are all, of course, voluntary standards. I think that when you're talking about, large multinationals who do have those enterprise management systems in place and do have those certifications to that suite of 45,000 standards, then it makes sense to them because they've already got those structures in place that there's now this child standard that shows them how that they can build this into the systems that are already there. So from that aspect, I think they view it as a positive because it's basically, well, we don't have to completely come up with a new system and structure. It's just about tweaking what's already here.
Yeah. And so the actual standard itself, like high level, how does it, yeah, it talks about things like psychosocial risk and all that. Can you unpack the standard a little bit more?
Yeah, so from the structural perspective, it follows the standard structure of all of those management system standards. So, understanding the context of the organization, workforce participation, all of that sort of thing, and then going through the planning, support, operation, performance evaluation, and improvement. So all of those steps are the same. Most of the content clauses are very similar to 45,001. So you'll find that a lot of the language is the same. But yeah, it introduces this concept of psychosocial risks, psychosocial hazards. So I guess that's more of the unique part of the standard there. So when we talk about a psychosocial hazard, what that's really, I guess, if we wanted a definition of that, it's really anything in the way that work is designed or carried out that can create a risk for psychological health or has the potential to create psychological injury in the workforce. And so, we can talk about things like, lack of autonomy. We can talk about poor co-worker support, poor supervisor support, low role clarity.
Workload.
Yeah, workload.
Yeah.
I think that's the obvious one. Workplace incivility. All of those types of things. And there's, I guess that the standard has a list. It's certainly not an exhaustive list, but it groups it into different categories of psychosocial hazards as well. So they're talking about, I guess, organizational level factors, team level factors, and then sort of physical environment factors that can also be a psychosocial hazard as well as a physical hazard, I suppose.
So one of the things that we're passionate about at the company is to help people and organizations identify these hazards. And so, yeah, like are people, I guess one way is that once you uncover it, you have to do something about it, but it already exists. And so I'm sure there's this tension between opening a can of worms. Have you had those kind of conversations with clients or people around really wanting to go on this, but also treading with care around uncovering things that maybe they don't want to deal with?
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose part of that comes back to, we can talk about the carrot and the stick. And in this case, the stick being, legislation. So for places like Australia, Canada, and the UK, where we do have general duties, workplace health and safety legislation in place, where there is an overriding requirement for the employer to, take all reasonably practicable steps to provide a safe and healthy place of work. Those duties can already be seen to include psychological health. So those obligations are already there. The fact that you have decided not to investigate hazards doesn't then mean that you don't have duties to do something about them. So, that's sort of like saying, oh, well, I haven't done any air sampling. So if anybody ends up with, lung cancer because of airborne particulates, that's not my fault because I didn't do the sampling. So I didn't know that they were there. It's not an excuse.
If anything, negligence.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is, I think, like kind of like a scary thing to think about as well. And it really takes leaders. I mean, a lot of our talks when we've been interviewing on the podcast, it always goes up, down to leadership or up to leadership, really wanting to do this. And it's a long-term project. Even once you identify the psychosocial risks, and then putting the interventions in place, the policies and all of that, it's not a quick fix at all. And so, what are your thoughts around that?
Look, you could say the same thing about a safety management system, right? You don't just do a once-off assessment of your physical work environment and the hazards that are there and put controls in place and then that's it, you're done. It is, it's a continuous improvement process and things change. So we do need to regularly assess our hazards, assess the risk associated with those, and implement controls and then monitor whether our controls are effective or not. So it's no different to the requirements of a physical health and safety management system. You still need to follow that process of continuous improvement and, monitoring and all of those types of things.
And so I guess I'm going to just do a shameless plug here because we talk about all of this, but then it's like the practicalities. How do people do this? And I guess that's what really birthed the product FlourishDX. So maybe can you just kind of tell us what is the product about? How does it help companies in relation to, the psychosocial risk that we've just spoken about?
Yeah, absolutely. So FlourishDX is a platform that's specifically designed to help organizations identify psychosocial hazards, assess the risks associated with them, and then monitor um, their progress over time in terms of how well they're managing those hazards. We do also have a feature within the platform that will help organizations to self-implement ISO 45003. And so that includes an overview of what the standard requires, as well as our recommended actions to meet that particular requirement. And so that's something that organizations can sort of progress through at the rate that they want to go at. And it, potentially saves them, getting external consultants in to do that work for them if they're able to progress through that themselves. In terms of hazard identification, we've got a wellbeing check-in tool. So that's a really quick sort of 30-second time commitment from employees where they basically pick how they're feeling today and then give us some reasons why they're feeling that way. So we're asking them for, personal factors as well as work factors. And then, where people have responded with a negative mood, we can then link those work factors that they've associated with their negative mood. And then that starts to give us a good bank of the types of hazards that are top of mind for people. So from there, we can use that then to populate our risk assessment, which we use as a way of asking employees for their exposure to those different hazards. So, are these hazards actually creating distress for you? Are they having an impact on your well-being? And if so, how severe is it? So how often are you exposed to those hazards? How long is does the exposure last for? That sort of thing. And then that can help us to give organizations essentially a list of prioritized hazards. So, these are the hazards that are causing the greatest level of distress amongst your workforce. And so these are the ones that you should be prioritizing in terms of action planning and that sort of thing. And we're able to do that at scale and in a really time efficient manner. So, for most employees, it would be less than a 10-minute time commitment for them to participate in that risk assessment. And then we've got interactive dashboards that sort of update live. You can apply filters to sort of drill down to look at different teams and all of that kind of thing. So we feel that this really, while the platform itself isn't the intervention, it's a scalable method for organizations to be able to conduct really high quality employee engagement at scale, get really good in-depth data that can actually be quantified in a sense, so that they can get a good baseline. They can conduct regular monitoring using the wellbeing check-in, and then when they're doing a reassessment, they can actually see whether their risk score for a particular hazard has reduced as a consequence of the control measures that they've put in place. So they can actually demonstrate that they've made an improvement there in people's psychological well-being. Yeah. So that's sort of what our tool does at a high level. We also have, wellbeing support features as well, because we do recognise that there's a shared responsibility for mental health between the employer and the employee. So we do have tools for employees to build their pillars of mental health using Martin Seligman's PERMA model.
And can you, for the listeners who don't know what that is, I know I'm asking like very, very basic questions, but yeah, what is the PERMA model?
Okay, so that's it's a positive psychology. Now I'm going to have to remember what the acronym stands for. I'm not going to. I don't think I can remember that.
I mean, it's picking up because a lot of people,
positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaningfulness, accomplishment, plus sleep.
Plus sleep.
There you go. I did it.
You had it in you. And I guess the sleep part is really important. And over here in Asia, it's one of the things that people struggle with. I mean, I think even from a very young age, because of the schooling system, what time it starts and the amount of homework, and that's another discussion. But sleep isn't really like a big thing here, and people struggle with it. So I think the report I had. Crystal Tang from Mercer actually on the podcast, and she was talking, I think the statistics was nearly like a quarter of people in Singapore, I believe, was suffering from insomnia. And so I think I love the fact that sleep is actually included in that. Because from a psychologist's point of view, there's research, isn't there, to link it to your mental health, or it has a very great impact on your mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. So sleep is absolutely vital for both our physical and our mental health. And so the two are just inextricably linked. Sleep impacts mental health and mental health impacts sleep, and you can get into a vicious cycle there. So that's why we've included it in the pillars of positive mental health, because while it's I guess a physical phenomenon, it is inextricably linked to our mental health.
I love sleep. So I
Me too.
I felt like I get about 8 to 9 hours a night, and I'm very, very protective of my sleep because I just can't function. I mean, I look at people like my husband who can get away with 5 hours and he's perfectly fine. And so I'm like, oh man, I wish I could do that. But no, I guess everyone's built differently. But I think it's the ideal hours about 7, wasn't it? Research have shown at least 7 to 8.
Seven
Around
to
there.
8 for the majority of the population, but I think you get people, on the distribution curve, you get people who do require less and people who require quite a lot more. So you 7 to 8 is, I guess, what you'd be talking about the general population, but you also need to pay attention to what your body's telling you that you need.
And how this links to work is actually when people have tight deadlines or busy season and all that, teams are working through the night. And sometimes not even just one night, it's they're getting very, very little sleep for prolonged periods. And of course, that's going to affect, your physical health and your mental health. So actually back to the psychosocial or like just risk factors at work that could lead to burnout and getting psychological injury at work. Sleep is actually, or allowing your employees to rest, is actually a really big thing. And so, I just kind of wanted to tie that back in because people might be like, oh, why are you guys talking about sleep? What's it got to do with anything?
So I think work, I guess the workload then ties to, sleep or appropriate time for rest and relaxation and that sort of thing, and recreation, and then we can also look at things like, rosters, shift workers, all of that sort of thing, how rosters are designed, roster patterns in terms of progressing from day to night, and all of those types of things will also have an impact. And then that also can potentially have an impact on physical safety outcomes as well, because we know that there's a really strong relationship between sleep deprivation and, just making mistakes. So, where we do have people, where we do have people in safety critical functions, or even just, driving to work or any of that sort of thing. If people are in that state of sleep deprivation, they are at greater risk of all sorts of things going wrong.
And in terms of anyone wanting to find out more about ISO, I know we do have that training available and it's free. Can you let our listeners know more about that?
Yeah, so you can go to 45003.org and basically sign up there. So we've got our introduction to ISO 45003, and you can progress through those modules. You don't have to do it all in one sitting. So it basically saves your progress as you go along. So you can just do them sort of 5 or 10 minutes at a time if that's all the time that you've got available at any particular point during the day. And it really does just take you through. So we take you through each of the content clauses and explain what they mean in a bit more detail and tie them back to 45,001 as well. So it's really just designed as an introduction because, recognizing that the trying to sit and read the standard, for some people that's fine. For a lot of people, me included, reading a standard is, not
not your version of fun.
No, not the most pleasant way to spend your time. So we've tried to, I guess, make that a little bit easier for people. So we're presenting it in a way that's hopefully a bit easier to digest.
And that's why I had the idea of having a conversation around this over a podcast, because you might not even want to sit there and do that, but if we can just get some high level knowledge across that there is such a standard that exists, albeit it's very, very new, and then for people who are wanting to find a more structured way to really approach workplace mental health. that this is a route, because I think there's still a lot of perception that is around programming and doing things that make people feel nice at work, and to try and retain them at work by giving them all sorts of benefits, when it's not really about that. And there is a more structured and an international standard around it. So that was kind of like the goal of this, because I still kind of felt the awareness was very, very little. I mean, in a very safety conscious culture like Australia, I'm assuming more people are aware of it. And there's also been some high profile cases as well recently in the news about some Australian companies around bullying, harassment and all that. Are you seeing the differences in terms of region or just people that you're talking to?
I think that it's more to do with industry. So we're finding that companies who do have, quite mature safety management systems, companies who are already certified to or aligned with 45,001, are, I guess, more interested in this standard and interested in looking at how they can incorporate it into their safety management system. And especially, in Australia, we're seeing a significant increase in focus from regulators, from the safety regulators in different jurisdictions, in relation to psychological health and safety. And we're having some new regulations, new model regulations will be coming in about a month's time, I believe, as well as codes of practice that have been released. So there's a lot of pressure now coming on organisations from the regulator that there's expectations that they will actually have systems of work in place to manage psychological health and safety. And so, I think that that's driving a lot of interest as well.
It is. I just love places like Australia and all that. They're really world leaders in terms of areas like this, where actually it's legislation and it's required. Well, it's actually even in certain parts of developing countries, even physical health and safety is not a priority, or it is, but it's the standards are still being developed and getting more robust. So definitely, like I know I used to work in a mining company, and just even like 3 points of what do they call it? 3 point contact.
3 points of contact.
Yeah. And that's like kind of for those
walking up the stairs. Yeah.
We had to learn that. I'm like, oh wow, how do I actually
hold the handrail?
Yeah. So, and like, we would have training on even how to pick up boxes. For back care, all of these things, like safety is there's such a preventative kind of approach towards injury. And so, I mean, it's not a surprise that it's one of the leaders in terms of prevention of injuries in the psychological space as well. So yeah, it's very different, I would say. And I thought just cross-sharing from different jurisdictions and like, industries and what we're seeing would be helpful for, how Asia is progressing and the listeners out here.
So I think, where you don't have that, from the safety legislation side of things, I think you can still look at other drivers to build your business case for this sort of thing. So, for example, ESG, for a lot of companies is a big one, and the S can be difficult to demonstrate. So ISO 45003 actually contributes to 7 of the World Health Organization's Sustainable Development Goals. So, if your organization does have ESG as a priority, that's something to build into your business case. I think the other things to think about are things like absenteeism, presenteeism, turnover. All of these things are strongly related to design of work issues. If people hate coming to work, those are the consequences that we see. We see increased absenteeism. We see people coming to work but not really being engaged and not actually doing their best work. And we do see them leave, and that's really what the Great Resignation,
Yes.
as it's been called, has been all about. It's not that people are just leaving work and not working. It's that they're actively looking for better opportunities, better working conditions, all of that sort of thing. So, these are costs that you can quite easily quantify. And if you can, there have been calculations around the impact that, improving work conditions have on those outcomes. So, you can fairly easily calculate the benefits of that for your business. speaking of which, in our 45003.org, we do have a course that basically goes through this type of business case and looking at the different levers and drivers that you can include in your business case. And so we talk about all of those components in there as well.
Thanks for that. That I'm sure that will be really helpful to listeners. And I think that there are a lot of employers, regardless of legislation, who really want to do the right thing for the employees and to create a really great
the moral argument. Yeah. let's not forget about the moral argument because it's the right thing to do. We don't actually want to have employees coming to work and just having a miserable time of it. We don't want to be no, I can't think of a polite way to say it when you don't want to be that guy. I rewatched. Do you remember Office Space, that movie from the late 90s?
No, I don't. Who's in it?
No.
Who's the actor or actress?
Oh, it's got Jennifer Aniston in it.
Bad Bosses? No.
No. Okay. This is too before, new. Well and truly before that. Yeah, Office Space. And yeah, this, like, the boss in there, he just takes absolute delight in making the lives of his employees miserable. And you can you can really see him just enjoying it, torturing these people who work for him. So, I think that it's funny because we can all see elements of that. I think anybody who's worked in a big corporate knows those types of leaders. I think, most of us really don't aspire to be those types of leaders. So for those of us who don't want to be those types of leaders, then yes, the moral argument, we don't want our employees to be suffering while they're at work. We want work to be somewhere where they can certainly be productive, but also,
enjoy
themselves and get some fulfillment and some meaning from the work that they're doing, and not just be a means to an end for survival.
And because we spend so much time at work, and it, whatever like we're holistic beings, so whatever we go through at work and even at home, it's the same person. And guess that's why I'm kind of like really glad to be able to participate and to contribute to this space, because if we can just make and help the work environment and, the working life of people better, like what a better world it would be. Like instead of being miserable every Sunday night and, and celebrating every Friday, which of course, it's still fun because of course the weekend's great. You get to spend time with your family and do fun stuff. Like instead of
just imagine going to work and doing fun stuff as well.
Mind blowing. Amazing.
I know, right?
And it's all around the people and great leaders, right? I mean, you stay for great leaders, and for the people that you work with, it's all around teams. And so actually this is so relational as well. I know we're talking about the ISO and everything, but actually a lot of it's just human relationships at work, and doing the right thing by each other.
Very much so. And there are, from a systems of work perspective, there are ways that we can actually facilitate those types of working environments through the way that we use our systems of work. The types of people that we put into leadership and supervisory roles, all of that sort of thing, how we respond to different types of behavior when it does occur, all of those types of things are systems of work that we can actually employ to facilitate that type of working environment that people do enjoy coming to.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time. I know we've just scratched the surface on it. But then, like we wanted to also put out there the resources because, it's one thing to know, and then one thing to actually try and implement and take baby steps. It can seem quite daunting, even such a big word like psychosocial risk. It's like, if you've never heard of it before, it'd be like, oh my gosh, I'll never get my head around this, or how do we do this? So thank you for kind of breaking it down, doing a 101 on it, but also sharing the resources. So please do stay in touch with Joelle and myself on LinkedIn if you want to keep the conversations going. This will be on our YouTube channel and on our Mentally Healthy Workplaces Asia podcast channel as well. And so, yeah, would love for everyone to join us again as we have another guest. But for now, just thank you so much for Joelle, and stay safe, and we'll see you at the next episode. Take care.